Last 4th of July, I buried my husband in an empty casket. Tonight, under the same fireworks, I watched him wrap his arm around another woman like I never existed. Hi, I'm Gwen. Before I tell you this crazy story, Happy Independence Day to all my fellow Americans out there. You need to know how it started, or none of this is going to make sense. A year ago, Peter and I stood in our backyard with half the town, watching the sky go red and blue over the river. He kissed my cheek, said he was running to the gas station for more ice, squeezed my hand, and walked off into the crowd. I remember thinking nothing of it. That was the last time I ever saw him look at me like he meant it. He didn't come back. Not in an hour, not by midnight. I called so many times my phone died before he ever picked up. And by 6 the next morning, 2 officers were standing on my porch with their hats in their hands. They'd found his car abandoned near the riverbank, keys still in the ignition, driver's door hanging open like he'd just stepped out and forgotten to come back. They said the current runs fast there this time of year. They said sometimes they never find a body at all.
This illustrates tactical ambiguity, where a manipulator stages a sudden crisis to induce severe emotional shock and delay any logical investigation.
3 years married, and I still got nervous butterflies hearing his truck pull into the driveway. He used to leave notes in my lunch bag. Dumb little ones. Don't let the vending machine win today. My grandfather used to say that house kept more secrets than the family who lived in it, and I used to laugh at him for saying it. So the year after Peter disappeared wasn't just grief. It was finding out the ground I thought was solid had been a stage set the whole time, and I'd never once checked what was behind it. His family showed up twice. Once for the memorial, once with a lawyer, trying to convince a judge that my grandfather's house, the one my family had owned since before Peter and I ever met, belonged to them now. I fought that for 4 months while I was still figuring out how to sleep alone in a bed built for 2 people. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I started losing things. Keys, whether I'd paid a bill, whole stretches of afternoon I couldn't account for. My neighbor found me once, standing at my own mailbox in my robe at 4 in the afternoon, not entirely sure how long I'd been there. She walked me back inside and made me tea and never brought it up again. And I let her not bring it up, because that was easier than asking myself what was actually wrong. I told myself it was grief. I had no reason yet to think it was anything else. Tonight, the town set the same fireworks display up in the same square, and for the first time in a year, I put on something that wasn't black. I told myself I was going for closure. I got there just as the food stalls were lighting up, found my usual spot by the fountain, and let myself breathe for the first time in months. I did not know that peace would last exactly 11 minutes. The square was packed the way it always is on the 4th. String lights over the food stalls, kids running around with sparklers, the smell of grilled corn everywhere. I stood by the fountain, the same spot where Peter used to buy us both lemonade, and for a second I actually felt okay. Then I saw the roped-off section near the gazebo, the one they set up every year for whoever gave the most money to the fireworks fund. Standing right in the middle of it, laughing at something, one hand resting on the waist of a silver-haired woman in a dress that cost more than my car, was my dead husband. I didn't scream. My legs just stopped working right, and I grabbed the edge of the fountain to stay upright. He looked good. Tan. Rested. Like a man coming back from vacation, not up from the bottom of a river. He reached for 2 glasses of champagne off a passing tray and handed one to her. Easy. Like he'd done it 100 times. Like she was the one he'd built a life around. I stood there with a candy apple I'd bought and forgotten I was holding. And something in me went quiet in a way grief never had. If Peter could disappear for a year and come back looking like that, he'd taught me something without meaning to. I could disappear too, right into this crowd. And I could watch. I stayed in the shadow of the food stalls and worked my way along the rope line until I could see her face better. 60, maybe older, not flashy rich. The kind where you can't point to any one thing, you just know. Peter leaned down and said something in her ear, and she smiled at him like she'd known him his whole life. I didn't know her name yet. I didn't know what she was to him, but I knew I wasn't leaving that square until I found out. A woman near me leaned over to her friend and said something about how generous it was. Whoever paid for the good fireworks this year, some name I didn't quite catch. A name that clearly meant something to everyone else in that crowd, but nothing to me. I'd been married 3 years and I couldn't place a single person standing in that roped-off section. Not one. That, more than anything else I'd seen so far, told me I didn't know my husband at all. When they finally walked to a car parked past the barricades, I got in mine, and I followed the taillights. I stayed 3 car lengths back the whole drive, hands sweating on the wheel, half expecting to lose my nerve at every stoplight. They drove out past the edge of town to an estate I'd never seen before. One of those security gate places with a driveway that curved for what felt like a quarter mile. I parked down the road and walked the last stretch on foot, staying off the gravel where it would crunch under my shoes. A side terrace had its doors thrown open to the summer air. I got close, behind a hedge that still smelled like it had just been trimmed, and I listened. "Everything's set for tomorrow?" the woman said. Her voice was smoother than I expected, businesslike. Nothing warm in it at all. "It's set," Peter said. She never even flagged the tax notice. I braced myself for the word mistress. Instead, the woman laughed, short and dry. "You were out of it too once, longer than a year. I never forgot your face, you know. Not once in 30 years. My stomach dropped. She wasn't his mistress. She was his mother. I stayed frozen behind that hedge while they kept talking. Half of it business, half of it strange and clipped. 2 people trying to build a relationship on the bones of one they'd never had. "You ever think about telling her?" Peter asked. There was something almost small in his voice. "Telling her what?" the woman said. "That I want her land more than I ever wanted you? Don't go soft on me. Not this close to the finish line." "And if she fights it in court?" Peter asked. "With what money?" the woman said. "You've made sure of that part." A dog barked somewhere behind the house, close enough that I froze against the hedge with my heart slamming, certain for 1 full second that I'd been caught. Nobody came. I made myself breathe and kept listening. I caught more pieces after that. A reservoir report, a development company, and a date that kept coming up over and over, the same date. Tomorrow, the 4th of July, the auction. I got back in my car and sat in the dark a long time before my hands would work the ignition. Peter hadn't left me for another woman. He'd left me for a payout, engineered by a mother who'd found him decades after giving him up. The 2 of them aimed straight at my front door. I couldn't stop thinking about the word fog on the drive home. I'd used it 100 times that year without ever asking where it came from. But grief doesn't usually come with the specific kind of fuzziness I remembered from those last few months before Peter vanished. The kind where I'd stand in my own kitchen and forget why I'd walked in there. I found a doctor 2 towns over, someone with zero connection to Peter or his family, and told her everything. The missed tax payment, the blackout patches of memory, the mornings I couldn't remember getting dressed. She didn't interrupt once. Then she asked one question that cracked my whole year open. "Did anyone else have regular access to your food or drink at home? Coffee? Anything like that?" Peter made our coffee every single morning. Said it was the one small thing he liked doing for me. I hadn't thought about that habit in months. She ran a panel most doctors wouldn't think to order unless you asked for it by name. It came back a week later. A low-dose sedative, the kind people take for anxiety, showing up in trace amounts consistent with regular long-term use. I'd never been prescribed anything like it in my life. I sat in my car in that parking lot and did math I didn't want to do. Someone had been dosing me, slow and quiet, for months before Peter ever walked toward a gas station that never actually needed him. Someone needed me distracted enough to miss a tax deadline I hadn't missed in 15 years of paying it.
Question for it. This is a classic case of economic abuse coordinated with covert gaslighting, systematically dismantling a victim's confidence to seize financial control.
And I already knew exactly who that benefited. That same week, doing what I told myself was just stress cleaning, I finally tore into the cracked plaster in the back hallway, the wall Peter used to complain about for years, and never once offered to fix. Behind a loose panel, wrapped in oilcloth gone soft with age, I found a stack of old paper certificates I didn't recognize. I called my grandfather's old lawyer before I called anyone else, and he was the one who told me what I was holding. Government bonds, older than me, still worth something. I didn't understand yet how much that would matter. I just knew they'd been hidden on purpose, and I kept my mouth shut about it. By the end of that week, I'd hired a private investigator. He didn't ask why a grieving widow needed surveillance on her very alive husband, and I liked him better for it. I gave him the estate's address and one instruction. "Get it on tape," I told him. "All of it." It took him 3 weeks. The second week, he called me at 11 at night and told me flat out that a security guard on the estate had clocked his car twice on the same stretch of road, and that he was pulling back for a few days so nobody got spooked before he had what he needed. I didn't sleep much that night, imagining Peter and Vivian packing up whatever paper trail existed and disappearing somewhere I'd never find them. But the investigator came back on schedule, quieter about it, smarter about it. And what he brought me confirmed everything I already suspected. Plus, one thing I hadn't known. The land wasn't just land. It sat on top of a reservoir a development company had been trying to buy access to for years. My family's 15 acres were worth more buried than they'd ever been on paper. I had proof of the fraud. I had proof of what they'd done to my own body without asking. And somewhere in a shoebox in my closet, I was starting to understand I might already be holding the thing that could stop them cold. The county held the auction on the courthouse steps at 10 in the morning on the 4th of July, 1 year to the day since Peter walked off toward ice that never made it home. The whole square was already strung with bunting for that night's fireworks, like the town couldn't decide if it was there to celebrate or watch a woman lose everything. Peter showed up in a suit I'd never seen, standing next to Vivian. I knew her name by then. Like the two of them were the only people who already knew how this would end. Their attorney had papers ready. The auctioneer had a number in his head. Neither of them looked at me twice walking up, flanked by my attorney on one side and 2 federal financial investigators on the other. The ones who'd spent 2 weeks quietly building a case off everything my PI handed them. A small crowd had already gathered on the lawn below the steps, mostly neighbors who'd known me my whole life. Half of them probably there just to watch a foreclosure. No idea they were about to watch something else entirely. "Before we start," my attorney said, loud enough to carry across the steps, "my client would like the record to reflect that the outstanding balance on this property was paid in full, in cash equivalent, 4 months ago." The auctioneer blinked at his paperwork like it might rearrange itself if he stared hard enough. Vivian's smile didn't move, but something behind her eyes did. "That's not possible," Peter said. "There's no way she had access to the bonds my own grandfather hid in the walls of my own house," I said. First time I'd spoken to him in a year. "Found those a while back, Peter. Long before you ever figured I would." I watched real panic cross his face for the first time since the fireworks a year ago. Vivian recovered faster. "This is a private matter," she said. "I'd suggest you step back before this gets embarrassing for everyone." "Before what?" I held up my phone. Before this plays for everyone standing here, I hit play. Her voice came out first, tinny but unmistakable. The tax notice, the fog, the reservoir. Her own voice saying she'd never forgotten his face in 30 years, and then his flat and businesslike. She never even flagged the tax notice. Nobody on those steps was pretending not to listen anymore. A woman by the courthouse doors had her hand pressed flat over her mouth. Someone near the back muttered, "Oh my God," loud enough to carry. The auctioneer set his gavel down like it had gone hot. One of the investigators stepped forward, badge already out. "Sir, you're under arrest." That was it. No speech, no recitation of charges for the crowd. Peter looked at me across the steps, and for 1 second I saw the man who used to bring me lemonade at that fountain. Before I remembered that man had never been real to begin with. "Gwen," he started. "You had a year," I said. I stopped waiting for an explanation around the time I found the toxicology report. They took him first, then Vivian, right there on the courthouse steps with the whole town watching. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like someone had finally let me set down something so heavy I'd forgotten it had weight at all. The legal side took weeks to catch up with what everyone on those steps already knew. Fraud, obstruction, a list of financial charges tied to Vivian's company that reached back further than my property line. Peter's side of the family, the ones who once stood in a courtroom arguing my grandfather's house should be theirs, stopped answering anyone's calls the week the story hit the local paper. I kept the house, all 15 acres, reservoir and all, my name on the deed with nobody else's attached to it for the first time since I said vows I didn't know were already a lie. I changed the locks that same week. Not because I thought Peter was coming back. Because it felt good to hear the new bolt click shut under my own hand. I fixed the back hallway wall myself. Nobody complaining this time about how long it took. My neighbor, the one who once found me standing at my own mailbox in a robe, came by with a casserole the week the story broke, the way people do around here when they don't know what else to say. She didn't ask a single question, just set it on the counter and hugged me longer than usual. And I understood that was her way of saying she'd been worried longer than I knew. Some mornings I just stand in my kitchen and breathe. Not foggy, not tired in that bottomless way I used to be. Just present, like I finally got my own life handed back to me. Tonight the town lit up the sky again over the same river, the same square, the same fountain where I used to buy lemonade with a man who never existed the way I thought he did. I watched the fireworks from my own porch this time. Alone. And for the first time in 2 years, alone felt like something I chose, instead of something that happened to me.
This illustrates the reestablishment of an internal locus of control, a critical cognitive milestone when recovering from narcissistic abuse and trauma.
Happy Independence Day. Once again, everyone.
Would you ever forgive a partner who betrayed you for money? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell.